Day. So our session is Differentiation Makes a Difference, Supporting Students at All Stages. My name is Jenna Rose Dahl. I'm the Burlington English Customer Manager for Minnesota and Wisconsin. So in my job, I get to travel around to all the different programs and provide support with implementation and getting new folks started in Burlington English. But I've had a long career here too in Minnesota as an educator. And I've got my colleague Angela with me.
Hi, everybody. It's so great to be back at the Summer Institute. All of my career basically has been in adult ed in Minnesota. So right now I work with Burlington, and Minnesota is not officially my territory, but I am always happy to help if anyone needs anything. Our contact information is going to be shared at the end here, but you also have an amazing customer representative. I prefer the title of teacher trainer and student trainer, really just helping teachers learn all about the great stuff we have at Burlington, and then helping their students work with it and be successful with it. So anyway, Sue Zhang works very closely with Jenna Rose in Minnesota. You probably all know him. He's amazing. He just happens to be on a vacation this week, so I got invited back, and it's great. I'm happy to be here. Recognize a lot of your names. Yeah. All right.
So this presentation, yeah, we just made this presentation basically based on, our teacher requests. We provide free professional development and training as we travel around to our programs, and a lot of times we ask, what do you want to learn about? And differentiation and multi-level classes, one-room schoolhouses, that came up a lot. Oops.
So the agenda today, I won't read it to you. You can all read, but we really do want this to be a conversation, a discussion. So we will ask you questions and either ask you to unmute or answer in the chat, share your thoughts. But we are going to take a deep dive into the challenges, the benefits, how to be creative with teaching to a multi-level classroom. And I don't think we're doing a breakout activity, are we, Jenna Rose? I think otherwise everything else is accurate here.
Yeah, I think because just got such a short time, we'll just keep everyone together. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we would love your thoughts. How do you organize your classroom? I know probably many of you do teach in a multi-level classroom. Jenna Rose, you want to share what's going on in the chat?
Definitely. So at this point, folks are just introducing each other or introducing themselves rather.
Okay.
But yeah, go ahead and type in the chat. What do you do to organize your multi-level classrooms? What strategies are you already using with your students? Yeah, so Tamara says she uses different reading groups. So that could be maybe, giving different reading assignments to different levels, grouping people according to their, reading level. Kelly says she has higher level students take the lead with some of the more beginning students. That can also be so helpful when you've got, folks of the same first language that can help translate.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit more about mentoring as we go on here. Chris just says group work organized in different ways depending on the activity. Wow, sounds like some of you already are doing some really creative things.
Relying on volunteers.
Partner activities, pair a high low together. Yeah. Great ideas. Thank you. Keep them coming. We might not be able to share them all out, but I love having all of this
Yeah, I always learn things.
Amazing. People have volunteers. That is such a gift. That's
Mhm.
wonderful. Um, okay, so there are a lot of different ways to organize a multi-level classroom, correct? Okay. We really like this quote by Betsy Parrish. Teaching multi-level classes does not mean preparing multiple lesson plans each day. Rather, it's a question of providing multiple options within the same lesson plan. Just a slight reframing, right? Of taking the burden away, or the supposed burden we have of, I have to create 4 different lesson plans. No, you really don't. And I think we've come up with some great strategies here with help of everybody like you.
Okay, so next, let's just share out what are some of the ways your students can be multi-level? What are some of the ways that they can have differences that might affect, how they perform in your class? So you can type in the chat. Yep, some are higher in speaking, while others are higher in reading, Suzanne said, which, yep,
Mhm.
I've definitely seen that with students.
Yeah.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, they might have different reading levels. Um, yep, that they might have, reading and writing at a different level than their listening and speaking level.
Right.
Um, their digital literacy skills might be at different levels. You might have folks who've never touched a computer, and then folks who, were an IT person in their home country. Um,
Mm.
Susan says she teaches Excel and there's a wide variety in math skills and comfort levels. Mm,
Different ABE levels, Jean says, different disabilities,
mhm,
different background knowledge.
mhm. Yeah, and a different ability in listening to audio. So Peter says assigning that individually with various options. Lots, yep, grammar knowledge,
Mm.
math skills all over the place, different school experiences.
Mhm.
Agreed. Um, so we've got a list with some other ideas here. So yeah, we touched on some of those. You might have a student who has great listening skills and great speaking skills. They might be really orally fluent, but they might really, really struggle with reading and writing, or vice versa. You might have folks who are really comfortable with their first language literacy. They went to years of schooling, and you might have students who are having their first time holding a pencil. Um, Folks with different digital literacy skills. And just to kind of share my own personal experience around digital literacy, I was taken out of public school, midway through when I was in middle school, and I was homeschooled with really ancient religious textbooks and cut off from technology. So I went to college as a first generation college student who had not really used a computer. So, my professor probably looked out at the classroom and thought, all of these students look the same, they are the same. But it really wasn't true from my own experience. I didn't really know how to act in a classroom, or what those expectations would be. I didn't know how to go to college because I was the first person in my family to do that. And I didn't know how to use a computer, or how to get online, how to type. I had someone teach me how to copy and paste over the phone.
Oh.
So, you can't just look out at the room and assume everyone is the same just because they're the same reading level.
Mhm.
Um, you might have folks who have different job skills or professions. They might have a formal or informal education. Those differences in personality, in learning style, whether they're more visual, or whether they need to take time. There's so many ways we can all be different. Um, Again, things like comfort with their new culture,
Mm.
comfort with their classmates, socioeconomic condition. This list is definitely not exhaustive, But the important thing is, if you have more than one student in your class, you have a multi-level class.
Yep.
Everyone brings so many differences and backgrounds to their education.
So true, Jenna Rose. It's a great, I'm going to quote you on that.
I don't think I invented it.
Oh, so in multi-level classrooms, we have challenges, absolutely. And I think we're all very, very well aware of that. But have we all stopped to think about the advantages of a multi-level classroom? Again, please feel free to use the chat if you see something that's not on, or if you know something, if your experiences have taught you something that we have not mentioned here. But I just love stopping and thinking about the advantages of a multi-level classroom, right? That peer-to-peer learning opportunity is so
He's in the meeting with Dave.
is so rich.
I do know where he is.
The modeling of critical thinking and problem solving skills that students share with one another, watching each other. Jenna Rose mentioned that used to be way back when I started to teach ESL taboo to allow people to speak their first language or their mother tongue in class. But wow, allowing the students when they're working on something together to share information, to share instructions with each other in the first language is, I just think that's a big switch in philosophy since when I started, and I think it's so important to allow that. Plus, it builds community, right? It fosters community, teamwork. Leadership skills, right? We're building all of those things with our students when we let them work together. Challenges. It is tough sometimes to foster that strong community feeling, especially if we have people of different learning levels who don't speak the same language. We always have to work to create the bond, right? And we have expectations that we have to adjust. So students completing exercise and activities at different paces. We have to change our expectations, adjust them, and then make it clear that there are different expectations without pinpointing or calling someone out for the differences. Varying the goals as well, and making sure that everyone's challenged and interested, but not frustrated, right? Not lost. Let's see what's happening in the chat, Jenna Rose.
Yeah, so Eric made a point that it's hard even when the teacher is new, but once there's a classroom culture with a common set of expectations and routines, those more experienced students can always help teach newcomers. And Krista said, though it seems I always have at least one student who speaks a language that no one else speaks. Yep. No one in class. Yes.
Yes.
Agreed.
It's so true. Yeah. Yes, very, very important. I think we all would agree to make the goals, the expectations crystal clear. How often do we actually ask our students what's going on, what they want, what they need? I mean, we work with adults. I think sometimes this is overlooked, and it's a super important thing to involve them in their learning process, in their learning journey. So some things that we can get input from the students themselves. We can ask them questions and ask them why they want to learn English. I think a lot of us do that. Why are you here? What would you like to do? Why do you want to learn English? But ask more specific questions, right? Do you want to? Would you like to get a job? Would you like to go to college? Would you like to travel? What does your future look like? What would you like to do in the next 5 years? And it also helps us flesh out the variety within the room. Tamara says, I can relate. I have 99% Somali who are always translating for each other, but I feel badly for the 1% and try to include them as well as much as I can. Absolutely. It's hard.
Yeah, and I love that, just including student input on those classroom expectations and goals. So everything from, understanding what your student's goal is and being able to teach them accordingly to help them meet that goal, to really getting some student buy-in when you're all kind of building those classroom expectations together. We're we're doing things this way because we want to meet everyone's needs and goals. All right, so thinking about pairing students, when we're putting our students into pairs or into small groups, we can consider back on things like goals. Maybe we've got some folks who are really interested in furthering their career, and then we've got some folks who really just want to learn some English so they can help with their children's homework. So it might be good to consider those goals when we partner people up. And to really consider all of those differences that students have with their different skills and strengths. So just for example, this is a screenshot from a Burlington lesson on internet crime. So maybe I've got one student who is really a great reader, is really confident with reading, and then they've never touched a computer before. And then I've got another student who maybe they were an IT person in their home country. They're really comfortable with computers and technology, but maybe their English reading level is low. Those two might be a great pair because the student with the higher reading might be able to help the other student with the lower level reading. But even though that student has a lower reading level, they might be able to help with some of these ideas about technology or computers or internet crime. Just as a topic. Okay, and so, yep, when you're building your small groups and your partner work, when you get folks together of the same level, that means you can give them level appropriate tasks for that whole group. And that can be a huge benefit to your class. On the flip side, when you mix them up, you can have those higher level students help or challenge the lower level students, help them move up a bit more, especially when you've got that translation piece. Yeah, and I agree. I know we need to find a good solution for our 1% student that doesn't speak the same language of everyone else in class. All right.
Another challenge is, sorry, General. I think we're level crossing. Sorry.
Yeah.
Fun of technology. Okay, so another challenge, various reading comprehension levels, right? How do we make sure everyone is understanding the reading when we have different levels in the room? So asking multi-level questions, is important to keep every level engaged. So the question really, we should strive to making the question meet the student at their level to make sure everyone is understanding. So when teachers adjust the learner outcome goals for various levels, that way the students don't get bored, they're staying engaged, it's not too frustrating, right? I love using the 5 W's and the H questions. I want a chart of this in my next classroom. I don't know, but anyway, I would have loved a chart of this just for my own reference. So for example, using the who questions. So the lower level students, you could ask when checking for comprehension, right? Who's responsible? The mid-level students, who can help solve the problem? The higher level learners, who's most directly impacted by what has happened or this person, right? So the more complex questions for the higher level learners. And I also like the little light bulb in the corner to use a variety of questions to evoke different levels of thinking. Absolutely. So we can ask what questions, talking about main idea. The mid-level students, we can ask about the details that support the main idea. So we're talking about, a text structure, right? The advanced students, how are the main idea and the passage related? Really getting those higher or those advanced thinking skills.
Yeah, reading comprehension. Yeah.
Reading comprehension skills. Mary Jo uses pictures on the overhead to explain many things. Absolutely. Old school works, still works well. Eric Paul says, yes, 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 yes. Pictures. Wonderful.
I saw Becky's comment too, that pairing up a high level with a low level student can be tricky for motivation sometimes. So I think, Becky, you're probably talking about, having a higher level student go, oh my gosh, why am I still working on this grammar? I already know this grammar kind of a thing.
Sure.
Definitely something to be conscious of in your classroom, that we're not just using the higher level students as teachers' aides. They want to be learning too. We still have to be meeting their goals and needs.
Yeah, that is a very important thing to point out. Absolutely.
Definitely. So next, we're going to go into some common challenges that people bring up with multi-level classrooms and some ideas and strategies to work with those challenges. So one common challenge is just fostering a strong classroom community. If you're breaking people up into different pods or groups, they might not get any time to really interact or talk with each other. So some things that you can try are doing whole class warm-up activities and group games at the end of class. So maybe, you've got different levels, but you're all working on the same topic of, housing. And so you could do a group warm-up together around that topic, and do a game at the end of class, maybe with the vocabulary, but break them up in the middle to do some different levels. Mixing those pairs and small groups. So a lot of times when you ask people to get into partners, they always go for the same partner, or they always end up in the same small group. So really getting folks mingling around so they're not kind of relying on the same group. And then I also just took this screenshot. So a lot of our Burlington lesson plans end with these kind of mingle activities, where you're going to have a student interview 3 classmates and complete a chart. So something like this can be simple because the students can fill in or write as much as they're able. For, what is your name? Where are you from? You might ask your advanced level students to write some more details. Or you might ask your intermediate students to then, read out loud what they wrote about their classmates. So lots of fun things you can do with these mingles too. All right. Another challenge that comes up a lot of the time is that you have students finish the class activities at different times. So you hand out a worksheet and you have 5 students who say, teacher, I'm done. And then you've got, 15 students who are still kind of working through the first portion. So that can be really tricky. One thing to try is giving your students some independent activities that they can do when they finish that. Okay, once you finish this worksheet, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to go on to this book that we're reading, and you're going to do some reading in this book, or next you're going to do some writing on this, giving them the next thing so they can move on when they're finished with that really that task that kind of will end at different times depending on their level. Also giving students just open-ended tasks that don't have specific time limits. For example, some, writing activities aren't going to necessarily have a I'm done. You can really write for a long time.
Mhm.
And then some teachers also suggested that this is a great time to have students work on their Burlington English student lesson or their vocab practice. So to say, okay, once you finish with this class activity, I'm going to have you start on your homework. So you're going to pull up your phone or open up your computer to do the corresponding homework for our lesson. All right, and I'm looking in the chat, Jean saying, one thing I use to encourage new partners is I have, picture card pair strategically gives two students that she wants to put together the same picture card. Then they have to find a partner with the same card. I like that. Gives you a little control over partnering.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a fun way to do it. It seems random, but it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be. Um, and then we alluded to this earlier, but one challenge is just choosing a curriculum when you're working with multi-level groups. And one thing we'd recommend is choosing curriculum that's theme-based. So even if you're maybe teaching different grammar topics to your different levels, you're all on the same theme. So this is a screenshot from our module 1 of Burlington English, which is personal information. So it has the same theme, even though the low beginners are going to be talking about themselves and the high beginners are going to be working on, goal setting and achieving. Low intermediates talking to neighbors and high intermediates getting into your personality and career. Really, we're all talking about personal info, how to introduce ourselves and talk about ourselves. So that's where we could start to really do some group activities, warm-ups, games together at the end of class. Another challenge is students have different goals. So we talked about this a little bit earlier, but just to go a bit deeper, one thing that can be really, really helpful is when you first have a student start to meet with them and really learn about their goals. What I did was I just made in Microsoft Word a little goal setting kind of sheet that had students write their name, and then I had them write what they want to learn, um, what times they're going to come to class, and what times they're going to study outside of class. And we would both go over that together and sign it, which I thought gave the students some buy-in on their own learning, because it was saying, okay, if your goal is, to get to level 4 of English, these are the things that we're going to need you to do. You're going to need to come to class. You're going to need to do some online practice on your own. So it let me really be intentional about building that plan with my students. How are we going to reach that goal? What are the things you're going to do? And then as the teacher, you've got a handy list, or you've got, a packet of paper where your students have each written their reason for learning English, what their end goal is. So you can keep that kind of handy for when you're breaking up students into different groups. So you remember that goal and how individual your students all are. Yeah. And Alicia, Alicia has a great idea in the chat. So when asking students about their goals, at first they tend to say everything. I found it helpful to offer ideas, and exactly right. So this is just a screenshot from one of the Burlington vocabulary lessons, but you can give them a sample list of ideas, whether it's to go to college or to get a job, or help my children with their homework, or um, yeah, giving them a list of ideas to start from is really good. For some of my lower level learners, I also on their page, I put pictures like English, math, grammar, so they could just circle, the pictures of which things they were really most interested in.
Hmm.
Mhm. Okay, another challenge is just the struggle of helping everyone at once. My North Minneapolis class, it was supposed to be, I think, 18 to 20 beginner level students, and it ended up being 22-ish, some beginners, and then someone brought, their wife who was a pre-beginner, and then some intermediate students were hanging around my class and they thought, this looks cool, so I let them join. And then, I had an advanced student. So it was very multi-level. And it was just me. I didn't have a volunteer. And sometimes I would look around the room and go, everyone needs help. I can't do it. I'm only one Jenna Rose. So I would suggest as a thing to try having students correct each other. One thing that you can do is you can say, okay, these higher level students, I'm going to give you the answer key. Or it doesn't even have to be a higher level student. I'm going to have you walk around with the answer key and help provide some support. And you can trade it off with each student so they each get some experience doing that and supporting others. Another option on a similar note is, let's say you're doing a worksheet. You might, as the teacher, fill in the first half on one and the second half on one and make copies. So your students are getting two different sets of that worksheet. And they can then work on filling it out, and then they can check their answers with the partner who has the other part that you have filled out with the correct answers. So that can be a way to kind of get them working and correcting each other. All right. Another challenge that comes up a lot is that we have higher level students answering the question first. So that, that happened a lot in my class. So some ideas that you can try in person. One of the teachers I work with in St. Cloud, she does this. She takes a popsicle stick and she writes every student name down on an individual popsicle stick. And then she puts it in a coffee mug. And then when it's time to ask a question, she's just going to pull out one of those coffee sticks and say, okay, Amina, it's your turn to answer. What's kind of nice about that is it keeps everyone focused because everyone's waiting, it could be their turn. They can't tell, with who the teacher is making eye contact, who's it going to be. They can't tell who's going to get asked this question. It could be anyone. Another great idea is to set a short timer for think time. So just saying, okay, we're going to put this timer on the screen. You can just do this with Google, or you can do this with the Burlington annotation toolbar. Putting that timer up on the screen. So everyone's going to say their answer at the same time when this timer goes off. That way, everyone is involved. Everyone gets to say their answer. And then an idea for doing this if you're teaching virtually. I learned this at last year's Summer Institute, this Waterfall Method. So before you ask your question, you're going to give your students the instruction. They're going to type their answer in the chat, but they're going to wait until the teacher says to hit the enter button or the send button. So that way everyone will put in their answer at different times, but when they hit enter or send, it'll all show up together. And that way everyone gets a chance to think through, to type up, and it stops that issue where if I ask a question and one person answers, then everyone else goes, oh, well, they already answered, moving on. Gets everyone engaged.
Sorry to interrupt, but we have about 10 minutes left in the presentation.
Awesome. Thank you for the heads up.
Thank you, John.
John.
I'm checking the chat. You can take a peek. I'll continue on if that's okay, Jenna Rose.
Definitely.
How many of you have station rotation models or have used them in your classroom? You can say yes or no in the chat. The style that I really like is here. It's a 3 station. So you can have students, especially if you're using Burlington, students can log in on their into their accounts on their phones as well if you don't have a computer lab available. So some students you can break into levels. So let's say a lower level student is spending time with the teacher in the teacher-led instruction. 15 minutes or 20 minutes, while intermediate level students are logged in into either a computer in the classroom or onto their handheld devices. And then the third group is doing collaborative activities of some sort. You can have them collaborating on a conversation, some worksheets. They can be working independently as well and not necessarily having to do a collaborative activity at the same time, but this works really nicely with multi-level classrooms. And everyone then still gets the teacher time, right? Just super important as well. There's also an idea for rotation model in a lab. So while in the computer lab, if you're a program that has that facility, does anybody use a rotation in the lab at all? Some people are saying they're using rotations. Some people are saying no. Okay. Well, in a lab, you can still have direct instruction, right? You have to think about physically how you want to lay the classroom out or the lab so that everyone has their the quiet they need, the concentration is they're able to concentrate. So first the teacher could do, for example, just the core English language lesson, then moving to the lab. And then they can also incorporate an IET career lesson as well in direct instruction. So we can go from a general English lab work back to direct instruction and career IET lesson and computer lab, right? Can be done in a rotation model. Some things to think about with rotation models, like I said, thinking about how the space is going to look, what sort of barriers are there to having students be able to be productive in the time that they're in these rotations, and also what sort of assistance are you going to give for those students who are not directly working with you at the moment. So it might require printing out instructions, for example, so that if, let's say you've got the group at the collaborative learning activities table, having some written instructions there will keep them from interrupting you while you're doing a direct instruction activity with another group, right? And just another layer of them working together to figuring out the instructions. What does she want us to do here, right? Another really important thing is to make sure you're keeping on time. So setting a timer or making sure that everyone is getting equal time at each station. All right. I know some of you have volunteers. Amazing. What a gift to have in your classroom. What do they do for you? How do you utilize that, those extra hands, eyes, feet? What sorts of tasks do you give them? Couple of ideas, just because we're short on time. In a virtual setting, we can implement like a flipped class model. So the student teaches with one section of students, and then we can really utilize that volunteer in another group in a breakout room. Okay, one-on-one support and tutoring. Some volunteers listen to students read out loud. Love the breakout rooms for all of these things if you're teaching virtually. But of course you can do all of these things in a face-to-face classroom as well. I have my volunteer coming one day a week. She will teach reading while I teach phonics. Different topics. That's great. Divide and conquer with the different topics and you can teach the different levels. Wonderful. Let's see. There are other opportunities for volunteers, like having them work in the lab. or helping students with logging in and navigating a Burlington English lesson. So kind of have a tech support person helping you in the classroom. We can always use people, volunteers who maybe don't necessarily want to do one-on-one with students. Wow, having that support in the room to make sure everyone's signing in with attendance. Looking at student progress. How many of us have struggled with finding the time to actually stop and look into student progress and find out how everyone is doing and where we can remediate, right? Where we can get involved, have conversations with students. All of that takes so much time. And a volunteer who's great with data, I would have loved that as a teacher, because data ain't my thing. So having somebody check the progress and write a little report for me would have been a godsend. But making sure when we do have a classroom assistant, that we're asking them what do they want to do, right? What are their strengths? What areas of the classroom interest them? And then make sure that that fits.
Awesome. So we're not going to take quite 10 minutes here, but I'm just going to pull up a Burlington in-class lesson, and we're going to discuss, we're just going to type in the chat what you would do to differentiate this reading activity for beginner students, intermediate, and advanced. So just a little bit of practice with what we're working on today. I'm just hopped over to Burlington here, and I'm just going to make this fit full screen. So this is our sample lesson. So go ahead and look this over and then type in the chat, what's one idea you have that would help you differentiate this activity for your students? One thing I'll point out too is there is an audio clip up here, so you can have students listen. So one thing that comes to my mind, certainly that we talked about earlier, is using those different question stems. So you might have all of your students read the same passage, but you might be asking them different questions or for different information. You have some sample questions here that you can ask, but you could certainly adapt these for your higher or lower levels. And yeah, Mary Jo says her lower levels, you might have them echo read. So like reading and repeating.
Great idea.
Any other ideas or anything that you picked up today that would help you with differentiating this activity? Yeah. So Alicia says you could have higher levels create questions. Ooh, that would be fun to create questions to ask lower levels even. Or create questions that they think are going to stump each other. That could be fun.
Sentence frames for answering questions for lower level writers. Yeah.
I like that. Yeah. Yeah, Tamara says, I think the recording would be important for lower levels so they can hear it. Higher levels can write questions and trade. Michelle says higher levels could write answers while lower levels answer verbally. I like that. There says thinking of ways to waterfall this, maybe all on paper and then pick a stick for each. Anne says lower levels could name words to describe the picture, black hair, red shirt, woman, coat, pants.
Yeah.
And Eric says having students pair off and read the text to each other. So many good ideas. Thank you all for sharing.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Great session.
So we're gonna just go ahead and skip ahead to share our info here since we're about at the end of our time. But feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions, if there's anything we can help out with. My contact info is here, so if you've got Burlington questions specific for Minnesota, you can reach out to me. Thank you, Mai. Thank you, Robert.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing and for bringing all of your knowledge to this presentation too. It's been great to go over this.